On this episode of the 260, we have two representatives from the Fort Wayne Ivy Tech Paramedic Program. Our speakers are Jen Cole, who started her EMS career in 1997 and has been a registered paramedic since 2000. She does have her Fire 1 and 2 and has worked as a firefighter paramedic. She also holds a master's in management and leadership and serves as a program director for Ivy Tech of Fort Wayne's paramedic program. She is an author of Paramedic Dissected, Things We Wish You Knew But Could Not Tell You, and a co-author of EMS Research. She also has 3 kids, with one of them working in public safety, 2 schnauzers, and a bearded dragon. Alongside her, we have Josh Daring, who holds an associate's degree in paramedicine and is a national registered paramedic and PI, and is a faculty member for Ivy Tech Community College for the paramedic program. He has a total of 15 years of EMS experience, 10 of it being a paramedic, and 2.5 years in education. On this episode, we discuss strategies for teaching students in different stages of life. We specifically dive into the challenges of learning loss during the COVID era, along with great tips and tricks for tackling those difficult learning obstacles and preparing students for the real-world setting. So buckle up, because this episode is packed with insight, real-world strategies, and practical advice for shaping the next generation of clinicians. Let's dive in.
Fed the dogs, fed the dragon.
Fed the dragon.
Yeah.
Fed yourself?
No, though I have a bearded dragon now.
Oh.
I have a bearded dragon now, so I'm not doing anything illicit. I am feeding my dragon.
You're just
Someday
feeding-
she'll breathe fire, I'm sure of it.
Oh my goodness. I forgot that you posted something about having a bearded dragon.
Yep.
I feel like your daughter had something to do with that.
She did have something to do with that, but the dragon had more to do with it than my daughter did. We were celebrating Myra's day, so we were just out and about doing things, and we happened to be going to pet stores because she has a snake, and she was driving all the way to Huntertown area to get her mice, and I was like, there's 3 pet stores right by me, and the snake is currently at my place.
How do you feel about having the snake?
Oh,
I was gonna say,
I
you
had
don't
a
really
snake.
mind.
I had a snake in college. I had a small snake myself, but I've told her I won't do anything with the snake. I have enough responsibilities. I'm not dealing with a snake that I don't know. But I don't care that he's there, except that he's a boy, and everybody else in the house is a girl. But we were walking through the pet stores, and I saw this cute little dragon, and I talked to her, and she immediately made eye contact, and then anytime I talked to her, she followed me. And when Myra talked to her, she turned her back to Myra. So Fancy chose me, which I was not wanting. I was very unprepared. The amount of research I've done in the last week blows my mind.
I look at your browser history, and it's like bearded dragons.
Yes, it's all dragon stuff. Yeah, my Facebook is taken over with dragon stuff. It's dragons everywhere all the time.
Your like shorts or little clips that you watch are all bearded dragons.
Yep. Well, there's some schnauzers still in there too, but yeah.
You're like, I still got the dogs, but it's been taken over by the dragons.
All the girls in the house except me have beards. It's wonderful. I keep trying.
Oh, one day maybe.
One day.
All right. So we're going to get into this, talking about how we can better educate our students, right? In different age ranges, different stages of life. And I want to bring you guys in because you are the main hub for our paramedics, our EMTs. You currently have how many students right now?
So we have 3 separate cohorts in paramedic class. So Josh has a class that's finishing that has 7. I always want to say 8. So it currently has 7 in it. I have a class that will start clinicals mid-May, and I have 12 in there. And then Josh's new class has 15. So whatever that shakes out to be. Mid-30s for paramedics right now, and probably close to the same. We're close to 45, I think, in our EMT just this semester. That's what we have going on right now.
Okay, and I want to kind of we're just going to jump right into this topic and talking about like the post-COVID era. Like, what are you guys seeing? What are some challenges? We pulled up one study before we came up here talking about the mental health development in that era, right? Those students that you're coming in, their social development, and there's like a loss of learning. How can we help those students? What are we seeing out there?
So personally, I think the study showing that the COVID kids, some of them are socially isolated, and let's be real about it for a second. And when we think about it, I think we really, really saw it our last semester with or some of our EMT students. They lost out on their first 2 years of high school because of all the shutdowns. So they're coming in as juniors and don't know how to be students in a higher level and learning environment. How we're dealing with that is trying to make them be social, right? Because everything that we do in EMS is about being social. If you can't interact with your classmates, how are you going to interact with somebody in an unfamiliar realm when they call 911, right? So we try to put them in that situation where they're uncomfortable and a little nervous. Teach them to communicate with one another and that it's okay to ask those questions.
Are there like certain exercises you guys are doing?
We've gotten more heavy with simulation and doing more realistic scenarios because I think there's a big misconception out there, and TV makes it out to be that, every run you have is a cardiac arrest. Your first run's a cardiac arrest, and your next one is a shooting, and the next one's a stabbing or something.
Someone that's buried underground or
Yeah.
something like that. That's
Yeah.
like unrealistic.
High
Yeah.
acuity all the time,
Yeah.
right?
And-
Not realistic.
The reality is, and as providers, we know this, most of the runs that we go on is a granny that fell on the floor and can't get up, and somebody that just needs that touch, right? Teaching them basic skills like that and just communication and how do you work with one another, or somebody that doesn't have a leg falling off or something like that is very real. And I think that's what we try to push to our students is not everything's what it seems on TV.
I think we've also found that things that they missed out on were some of those less traditionally taught things and more absorbed things from our instructors or administration in schools and stuff like that. So I know I never had to be taught what appropriate behavior was in a public setting, right? I just didn't have to be taught that. I didn't have to be taught how to sit in a classroom, literally just sitting in a classroom and interacting with the class. And if we think back to these kids, what were they doing during school? Well, they were laying in their bed in their pajamas. They were upside down on the couch. They were however they wanted to be in quirky young kid behavior stuff. And we see it, and well, at least I saw it in my own behaviors of my children at home, right? Upside down, doing whatever, right? That's how they exist in their silly little world. But in school, they knew what was expected and what was appropriate, and in life and out there. And one of the things that we've seen, particularly highlighted in this last semester, was that they don't understand that they're not being appropriate in some of their behaviors. And historically, when we saw people do dumb things and things that were unacceptable like that, it was somebody choosing to not be acceptable in their affect. And now I think it's lack of understanding, right? So one of the things that we did was I put together a PowerPoint of appropriate behavior and appropriate responses and expectations, because historically we understood those things and those behaviors were kind of known to be the expectation, doesn't mean that we can just leave it be the unspoken and then penalize them when they lay down on a couch when there's a couch in the room and they're laying there doing something, right? And we get the call like, hey, they were sleeping, they were laying on a couch upside down, and that's just not okay. Well, it's not okay, but do they know it's not okay? And it's a question I never thought I'd ask myself. But the reality is, I don't know that they do know it's not okay. So we put together a presentation, made a recording of the presentation saying these kinds of behaviors are unacceptable, these kinds of topics of discussion in a clinical or field setting are unacceptable. And this is what we expect of you, and this is why, and here's, resources in the handbook that say these are our expectations. But we have to stop assuming that they have any baseline. And
think
that's
that's-
hard. It's really hard. But that's, I think, where the rubber meets the road as educators. It's all fine and good to say, well, we're going to change this style of teaching or this style of teaching. And those things, like Josh talked about, are excellent, right? We need to do those things. But we also need to make sure we are very specific in our expectations of them, their behaviors, because they don't know them. They didn't get them modeled for them by people in their formative years. They didn't have a teacher say, Johnny, sit up. It's unacceptable for you to sit like that. You can't lay on the floor, right? Nobody told them that because they literally went to school laying on their bed or on their floor or upside down, right? We have to be explicit.
That kind of brings us to Gen Z. They have a lot more aha moments where you have to be like, you know what, like this, I shouldn't say common sense, but this should be kind of natural. But once you explain it to them, they're like, oh, that makes so much sense. And I'm kind of in the middle of that generation. I'm a zillennial where I'm like at the end of one and the beginning of the other one. And I'll have those moments where I'm like, I don't know why I didn't get that until you just explained it to me. But it's kind of like that where we have to do more, hey, this is my expectations. Let's walk you through this a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we see that across generations too. And it's not just a Gen Z millennial thing, because I actually just experienced this with one of my students this weekend, or this past week, where he's an older student, and it took a little bit more time, but once it finally clicked, it was that. He got it.
I think it's more rewarding
Yeah.
when we see them click after we've had to do a bit more work, right? It's rewarding for us, I guess I should say, right? It should be rewarding for them no matter what. We're still proud of them, but when we finally figure out the key to that lock, it's like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, and it's rewarding because you truly do see it in their eyes. It's like I got it, and their eyes just are completely lit up. Like, I've got this now, and nothing's gonna stop them.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, that brings me to our next point here. So, again, talking about when you have the students that you guys have, you are all over. You have people straight out of high school, some people that are just starting their young adult lives, getting married, having kids, life events, and then the older groups that are like, hey, I've been an EMT for 20 years. I want to be a paramedic now.
Yeah.
What have you guys noticed with having a melting pot of age ranges and teaching?
I think it's fun and exciting because you see the kids that are straight out of high school and they don't have the life experience. They never had a job, never had kids, all of the things, still living at home with mom and dad. Good for you. They bring something fun and exciting to the table for the older generation because the older generation tends to struggle with technology. And a lot of our things are technology based. We use Ivy Learn as Canvas based. So a lot of the older generations tend to struggle with that. So what we tend to see is like the areas that older generations struggle with that the younger generations are really good at, they mesh and they mingle. So then they start sharing some of their life experience with the younger generation, and then the younger generation gets more technology based with the older generations that may not have that experience. So they tend usually to mingle well. It's breaking down that societal of, you're an older generation, you can't teach me anything. They can. And
Yep.
just like that, the older generation has something to learn from them as well.
One of the best ways that we tap into it early on is I have an expectation in all of the programs under me that we will highlight the brotherhood and the sisterhood. So things that fire and police do really well, EMS does really poorly. And that is the whole brotherhood thing, right? We're taught, or most of us were taught at some point in our career early on, that as a higher level of certification or licensure, everything's on your shoulders, right? It's all you. It's all your responsibility. It's all your stuff. And while that is true, that also breeds a level of individualism that doesn't really support the brotherhood and sisterhood. This is my responsibility. This is my fault. This is my box. This is my call, right? We hear things like that. I've even said them in my career. For me, it's important that we emphasize that you always have a partner and that we always have our brothers and sisters. And it starts in the classroom if we really want it to be done well. And that is that I expect if your brother or sister doesn't have a book, somebody's going to share their book. If they don't understand something, I expect them. And we tell them that you are expected to help one another. It's not a, oh, well, look at them struggling again. Oh, no, that's your struggle too. You're in a squad for skills and for lab and stuff like that. If your squad's not done, you're not done. And you really should be helping out another squad and stepping up for your brother and sister. And I think in that way, we breed an almost, I don't want to say force, because that sounds a bit extreme and aggressive, but we persuade, we push, we get them to have some of those interactions that Josh just talked about. So some of that is super helpful because I expect you to work with each other, and you don't get to choose your squad. We assign them randomly, so the 18-year-old might be in there with the 40-year-old, and there are going to be things that they're going to have to navigate with one another that we're not going to hold their hands for, right? So there's going to be some head bumping, and that's okay, because the reality is on the job, dealing with people is 90% of what we do, right? We get this little bit of medicine that we throw in there, but so much of it's interpersonal relationships and how we interact with folks, right? We get patients to tell us things, but in order to do that, we have to be somebody they want to tell things, right? So that's all important. I do think on the other side of that, we also try to have different modalities of learning in there, right? There's videos, there's things to read, there's all these different things. So if you're a reader, you can read it. That's me, right? You, I'm guessing, Caitlin, you're going to want to watch a video, right?
I am going to watch
I'm not going to
video.
watch a video. If I watch a video, I have to watch it at 2 times the speed because it bores me. I read really, really fast. I can skim through something really fast. I can have the information way faster than the video is going to give it to me. And I'm just going to get angry while I watch the video because they present with those intentional pauses that make me want to hurt people.
Do that for editing, okay?
Yeah, it's just like, ugh.
I notice I tell a lot of people this, or a lot of the younger group that I've noticed that I've helped mentor. They're like, hey, I got written up, or I'm getting in trouble for my behavior, or maybe they said something that they probably shouldn't have. It was an inappropriate conversation, but like you said, they don't realize that. People are really loud right now.
Of course they are. It's okay. Josh just fell out of his chair. It's okay.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. But they don't realize that it's an inappropriate conversation or something to bring up. And I'm like, I think us older individuals need to realize they're young adults. They've never been an adult before. They're just coming into this. It's wrong for us to have the expectation that they're 30 or 40 and have 20 years of experience in this, and having that wrong expectation for them when they're just starting out.
We need to just be playing with them sometimes. One of the cool things about the younger generation is that they are more open about everything. Race, sexual orientation, people embracing who they are. They're really, really cool about a lot of those things, right? Some of those judgmental pieces that have happened historically seem to be so much better with this generation, and they fight for the rights of others and equitable living, right, which is fantastic. But definitely being more open and comfortable verbally and having conversations that are not workplace appropriate. I love that they're having those conversations. They just need to understand boundaries, right? And I think we have to make sure we're letting them know those things. Like, you know what, this is amazing, and I'm super glad that you're comfortable expressing all of this stuff, but I need you to understand that this is not an appropriate place for those conversations to happen, right? That needs to be on your personal time, or somehow, some way other than at work or at school.
Gen Z, that specific generation, they're very purpose driven. And, employers out there and educators out there, if you don't provide a purpose for why they're learning something or why they're doing something, they're going to be less apt to do it. And it's purpose driven by like their personal needs. It's not, oh, I want to be the most successful EMT out there. It is, how can I provide for my family? Because right now, realistically, buying a house is very expensive. I've bought two so far. Not a fun process. Don't want to do that again. Knowing that their purpose is mainly family and themselves kind of helps you gauge that education a little bit better and how you're going to direct like your new hire programs and your recruiting and stuff.
When you look at all the generations, they all had different whys, right? And you had to tap into that why to get them to do something, but they had different whys, right? When you look at the baby boomers, the why was because that's how it needs to be done, and I'm here for the company, and this is going to allow me to do all these things in my life and home. And, right, it was very boxed in and company oriented, right? And then as you got a little bit younger, and I'm a Gen Xer, right? So, yeah, I'm old, all right? I'm a Gen Xer. Sometimes it's, oh, I need to do that. I don't really want to do that, but that's a hurdle I got to get through. Okay, fine, I'll do it, right? Done. Leave me. Get out of my way. Let me do it. Let me do it my way. It'll be done. Now, things that I want to do for me, you should probably also get out of my way because I'm just going to do them. I don't need you to do them. I don't need you to help me. I need you to get out of my way. And that's a lot of Gen Xers, right? Just like get out of our way. We are latchkeys. We did things on our own. That's really how we want to exist. So for us, it can be hard to tap into people like Joshua here. Right?
That's what I was just thinking. Don't get in her way or you're going to get hurt.
And for Josh, a lot of times he needs a little bit more, right? It needs to be a little more social. It needs to be a little more group and, the bigger why and the meaning and all that kind of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. But as long as we understand some of their individual why, as far as their age group, and then even personally, right? Because let's be fair, those generational things, those lines are wavy or dotted, right? I was in a relationship and he was at the young end of baby boomer. And when we first met, it felt like it wasn't a big deal. And the longer we were together, the more the realization is that while he didn't feel like he himself was a baby boomer, he was a staunch baby boomer. And there were some definite headbutts with my generational characteristics as a Gen Xer, and they did not always work well together. And so sometimes that can be a trial in the workplace or in the classroom. But I think as long as we're open to tapping into that why, because I think the reality is, as an educator, the most important thing is it's exciting to help other people grow, and it's not about us. And if we can tap into that, even what you can do with your students is unlimited.
Understanding that why, obviously, like Jen, I can hand you a manual, like you said earlier. You're going to get that. I want to watch a YouTube. I don't know about you, Josh. What about you? What generation are you in?
I'm a millennial, but I'm the same way. I get bored with reading and I can't do it. I can and do, but I'm very 20, 30 minutes. Check me out. I'm done. Give me the Cliff Notes. Good.
Yeah, I am a skim reader. I do love to read. Like, don't get me wrong. I love me a good book.
Yeah.
But
that's different.
Yeah, that is a little bit different. But I cannot sit down and read a textbook. I can skim read. I can still interact with it, but do not expect me to actually sit down and fully read cover to cover.
So this last semester, I've been taking some accounting classes, working on my degree, and reading it. Accounting's a whole different world just because it's numbers.
Yeah.
And I'm horrible with numbers, but they just throw so many numbers out there, and by the time you get 2 or 3 paragraphs into it, I'm lost, right? But in the class that I'm taking now, or the accounting classes that I have taken, it just breaks it down and shows you. I learn much better that way than reading a bunch of stuff, and 10 or 12 sentences in, forget it.
All right, so we're going to transition into a little bit of the middle generation. We kind of talked about, the baby boomers, Gen Xers. What about the adults right now they have kiddos? What issues are you guys I shouldn't say issues, what struggles or challenges with those individuals that they have kids at home, they're having trouble studying? Mm-hmm. I get that a lot. They're like, hey, I have a newborn, I have a toddler, I have all of this at home.
Yeah. And it's a reality though, and it brings up different challenges because they're like, how do I do this and how do I navigate it, right? And I think a lot of them, for studying purposes, like they tend to like to listen to things. Drop the kids off at school, now I'm heading to class. Well, I'm going to listen to this lecture, or I'm going to listen to it this way, and that way they're making the most of their time and they're using the absolute most amount of time that they can while doing two things at once. That tends to work well for them. Having them not necessarily redo their schedule, but also like just setting apart specific times. I'm going to spend an hour studying this material this day, and breaking things up into smaller sections so that they can continue to navigate life and work and kids and soccer and all of the things that come along with that.
I think it's tough for them, just that management of their time, right? It's a big deal. They deal with a tremendous amount of guilt, right? If they're not studying and they're doing things for the family unit, they feel guilty because they should be working on this degree piece, which is eventually going to help them financially in their livelihood, right? And then if they are studying and working on classwork and bettering themselves, there's guilt for not doing things right then with the family unit. And so they struggle, right, with the balance of that. And they really have to be intentional in their time and recognize that there's going to be short-term things that they have to sacrifice in order to meet long-term goals. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do anything with your family. It doesn't mean you have to pull away. It doesn't mean any of that. But it does mean that, maybe you make 90% of those soccer games as opposed to 100%, right? Maybe you don't coach this year, but that doesn't mean you're never going to coach again. And one of the things that it's important to get across to, I think, that group of individuals is that this isn't long term. You're not saying, you're less important to me, little Timmy, and I'm not going to do things for you because I'm selfish. It's right now, I have to do a little bit less there so that I can do this, so that we can maybe live a better life, all of us. And then I'm going to be able to do that again. It's one season or 2 seasons as soccer, if they play both seasons, right? That could be a lot. It might even wind up being 3 with soccer. But anything else, you're looking at 1, maybe 2 seasons of it being, something that affects that family unit. But what you're instilling in those children when they watch you pursue something intellectually and to watch you study and to watch you learn and dedicate some time is a big thing. You're showing them that education, even at their level, is important. So the things you're laying the groundwork for, they're these unsaid messages that are a big deal. And I think they need to recognize that too, right? When you're studying, it's okay if your kids see you study. It's okay if you say, hey, I need to work on this, because they're going to have projects, reading, assignments, homework, things that they need to do that they need to focus on. And it doesn't always, but it can inspire them. But that's a tough age group because I think financial, mental health, there's a lot of draws on them and they can get really overwhelmed. So the other part of being an educator is being open to allowing them to express, I'm struggling right now, and this is why. We don't always have the answers. Sometimes we can point them to resources, but sometimes all they needed was to let it out, right? And to know that it's okay not to be perfect. We've all struggled. I had 2 preschool-age kids when I went through paramedic school. It was pretty hard. And I was a single parent at the time. So I couldn't have done it without my parents, right? Their support, but not financial, because, there was that. Yeah, they were just support and helping to take care of my kids so that the kids were safe and well while I was gone 100+ hours a week, right?
I was kidless and husbandless when I went for the paramedic program, and that was hard on me. And I had my dog. That's all I had. And a car. That's all I had. Talking about struggles, what are some common struggles you are seeing in the classroom in reference to maybe ADHD, dyslexic people?
ADHD, I think we see all the time, right? We all, I think, are all running around undiagnosed.
All
As
of us
we-
sitting right here as we're facing a window, be like, we need to look away from this window.
and our fidget toys and
Yes.
our whatevers. Yeah, I think EMS is appealing to folks with attention issues, right? We don't have to go to work and do the exact same thing every day. It always looks different. You know, there's always distractions. You might be doing one thing and have to immediately stop and go to something else. We are excellent at that. It's like, you know, we've made it an Olympic sport. Yeah, like, oh, yeah, you want me to switch topics? Okay. Oh, and then we'll switch back somehow seamlessly, and we don't even know how or why, but yeah. So I think that we're pretty good at dealing with that. Like, we don't mind people fidgeting, needing to stand up, wiggle around. If you've ever been in a classroom where I've been a student, I'm a terrible student. I don't sit still. I don't look like I'm paying attention. I probably am, it's hard. It's hard. But I think we're pretty comfortable with those kids because it's the vast majority of us, right? I think I struggle with those ones that are intense learners, right? Because you're just like, breathe. You need to calm down a little bit, right? Like, dyslexia, that's a tough one. And there's been so much new stuff that has come out in the last couple decades about how to help them that our disability support services folks are fantastic. And they're really who deal with all that stuff. But I mean, there's studies now that show that if the colors on the computer screen are just different, that the letters will arrange themselves better for them, or they'll be able to interpret them better, and they can be way more successful, which is just amazing.
Yeah, and for people that don't know what dyslexia is, to kind of simplify it, it's people that use the right side of their brain versus the left side. You know, there is some things about how fast messages are being transported, and then that you can go into, but just to kind of simplify dyslexia, they're just right-sided thinkers. So they're very creative. If you think about what the right side of your brain does, you're very creative. Your left side does more of your logical thinking and your numbers and your reading. So hence why reading just seems to be a big thing that comes up with them.
Yeah, it's a big hurdle when you're in an educational setting, right? It's a really big hurdle. And
Have you used ChatGPT where you type in, you're like, hey, I have a dyslexic student, this is the assignment, can you make this make sense? Or can you explain acid-base balance using Disney characters?
I've seen the acid base with Disney characters. That's fun.
Yes.
Actually, that's super fun.
I need to look that up, apparently.
Oh, yeah, you do. ChatGPT, I think we're all just starting to get a little comfortable with AI and using it for some various things. I haven't used it to help with instructions for folks to understand things better. That's a really good idea. I think probably the better use of that would be to encourage students to put directions in there themselves if they know that they don't understand what the directions are asking, to describe it. And that could be a really great template, but we would need to give them some sort of setting for that, right? You know, because I know I've used it quite a few times to be like, hey, polish this and make it look like, it's a professional, right, whatever, portfolio quality statement, or,
I think the other piece with any kind of, I don't want to call it a learning disability, but like ADHD, dyslexia, reading comprehension, and those sorts of things. Like, I think it's really important that students know that, and we preach this a ton with mental health, like it's okay not to be okay, right? But we need to make sure that students understand that as well, because oftentimes they think that all of a sudden I'm out of high school, or I've been out of this, or maybe I've been undiagnosed because I'm an older generation student, and now this is a problem because I'm going back to college. But they don't necessarily recognize that. And we as instructors see it, and it's like, have you ever thought about this, and maybe this is the problem? They're embarrassed, ashamed, any number of emotions to admit that. But again, that is 100% okay, and we're here to help with that. And we've got departments that do help with that. So I guess my advice for students, if you feel like you're struggling with something, talk to your instructors, because we can help with that.
Yeah, we get
That's
a lot
something
of
I really want to drive home with that.
Yeah, we get a lot of people that'll say, well, I'm this, and whatever it is, right? And we'll use dyslexic as an example, since it was something that just came up. I've had these struggles. And when we say things like, well, there's assistants out there, right, that we can get you that can help make things easier. And sometimes we'll hear stuff like, well, I'm taking it as a badge of honor, and it's a matter of pride that I haven't needed anything to get to this point. And I'm like, wow, because you're not going to see me coming to work without my glasses, man. And the reality is that getting help so that it's easier to read or digest the material or whatever because you're dyslexic is very similar to me needing an assistive device to be able to see, which happens to be my glasses, right? And I'm not going to be successful without my glasses. That doesn't mean that everybody has to wear my glasses with my prescription. That's silly, right? And when we break it down to being those things that like, hey, this just makes us equitable, we're all on the same level then. And we would love to remove all the barriers, but I can't go poof and wave a wand and take away the dyslexia or the whatever the issue is. But we can find those things that take away some of those hurdles, and that just makes us level now, right? And I would really like for you to be on a level ground with the rest of us and see what you can do. And when they recognize that, and I think I made an analogy, I don't know, a couple weeks ago with somebody who is struggling and really then hyper-focused on whatever a tiny issue was with that struggle. And I was like, look, it's like leaving your house with your left shoe not on. While it would stink to leave your house without your left shoe, it's not leaving your house without your pants, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like,
A little less work.
let's put it in perspective as far as how severe is this thing really. It's annoying, but could you manage? Could you drive to the store without your left shoe? Yes, you can. Can you drive to the store without your pants? Probably. Should you be going in the store without your pants? Well, definitely not, depending on what you wear under your pants, right?
Or what store you're going
Or
to.
what store you're
yeah.
going to. But we need people to realize that some of these things that they think are life-altering, because maybe they were back in the day, right? And the shame that they feel about them is so terrible, right? Because they didn't choose it, right? If they chose it, that's probably a different conversation for a different kind of doctor and a different kind of person. But if they didn't choose it, then they have to navigate it. Hey, put on your glasses, man. That's all it is. It's just a tool. We need to help remove those stigmas so that they see that it's no different than one of us putting on our glasses. Because glasses are pretty well accepted, right? But let's be honest, it's an assistive device.
And at one point, it wasn't accepted. At one point, you got made fun of for having glasses.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've had them since second grade. It was pretty big, awful back then, back in the late 70s, early 80s, because I'm old. Yeah. It's fine. It's fine. I am not a boomer. Don't call me that.
Love it. I love it. How are you guys preparing? And this is kind of the last thing before we end it here. How are you preparing students for the real world? I know we hear the phrase a lot. The book and what we actually do are two different things.
We hear it all the time, right? Like, oh, the way you're going to do it here in the classroom is very different than the way you're going to do it on the street. It shouldn't be. The approach starts out a little different because we got to break it down. But the reality is it really shouldn't be that different as to how it's done on the street. If you are teaching that differently, there's probably an issue with your teaching. What we see is, and we'll use EMT skill sheets, right? Because that's often what people are talking about. That's not how we do it in the street. Well, yeah, it is. It's just very linear, right? Because we don't have a piece of paper that we can give somebody that's a mile wide and only an inch long. Because that's the reality of the job on the street. We do so many things at the same time, but you can't put that on a piece of paper, right? You have to do it linearly, like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, when really, in all actuality, those things are all happening simultaneously in the real world. You are checking scene safety. You are making sure you have BSIs on, even if you're not doing jazz hands. Please don't do jazz hands, right? But you are making sure you put your gloves on. You are making sure you look around at the environment. You are really doing all of those things. Now, a lot of them become second nature, and we don't think about doing them anymore because we're just naturally doing them.
It's muscle memory.
It is muscle memory, and we process it so much quicker. It's kind of like when you learn how to read an EKG, You're very deliberate about each of the pieces and parts and the way you look at it. And after you've been a medic for a while and you look at EKGs all the time, you glance at the EKG, you know what it is, and you go about your business. When somebody's like, how do you know what that is? Well, it's just, that's what it is, right? And some really strong medics out there couldn't tell you exactly how they know that that is that. They just know it. Well, they learned it step by step. They've just integrated it differently. So that's part of it, right? Like, I feel like we do things the way they should be done on the street. There are things that happen on the street that shouldn't be happening on the street. Let's be honest about that. In all levels, in all walks, in all disciplines, right?
Yeah, we get complacent.
We do.
We cowboy some stuff that we probably
Yes.
shouldn't.
We probably should. That's probably not good for us or our patients. But beyond that, I think we started doing simulation before it was required by the accrediting body. And I think us doing simulation has allowed for some of that real life stuff to just click in a little bit earlier. And I'll actually take up a little time and give an example. It's been a long time ago, and I actually think that the student that this was is now, she's a nurse now. We were still in this building even, and we're doing simulation early on, and she's running a call with somebody else, and she's the team member. She's not the team lead. So the team lead is taking care of this fake chest pain patient, right? And the lead says, will you get me some nitro? Oh, absolutely, right? So the student gets the bag out, opens the zipper. There's a little pouch inside the zipper. She has to open that little pouch, and she has to get out the nitro, right? So then she sets it aside. She zips up the little pouch, puts it away, zips up the side of the bag, right, and puts it down. She administers the nitro as requested, right? She then opens up the side zipper on the bag, pulls out the little pouch, opens the little pouch, puts the nitro back, zips the pouch back up, puts it away, zips the bag back up, and puts the bag back where it belongs, right? So we all know we can give nitro every 3 to 5 minutes, right? So roughly 3 minutes later, her team lead says, hey, can you give another nitro? And I saw her just inhale, exhale, like this defeatist, are you kidding me? I just put it away. And so she gets the bag out, right? You guys know where I'm going, right? Mm-hmm. She unzips the pocket, she takes out the pouch, she unzips the pouch, she takes out the nitro, she zips up the pouch, she puts it away, she zips up the pocket, she sets the bag aside, she gives the nitro, and I watch to see what she's gonna do. And thinking that she's doing something wrong, right? She kind of hides the fact that she just puts the nitro in her pocket. And then the next time, her lead is like, hey, can you give me a nitro? She pulls it out of her pocket, boop, administers the nitro. And there is learning that you can't do in a classroom. You can't say, hey, you're gonna wanna make sure you find a place to put your nitro. Or, let's be honest, there are so many things like that we can't say those things. But when they happen in that simulation setting, it really sets the pace for life, right? Like, you know, if it's a med that you're probably gonna give on repeat, you're gonna put it somewhere. We all have that place that we put our nitro, right? Where do you put your nitro, Josh?
Usually in my pocket.
Usually in your pocket. Where do you put your nitro?
On my right side pocket.
On your right side, right? Like on your right leg pocket. I asked somebody the other day and they said they put it on the workstation, right? They set it up right in a very specific spot. Mine always went in my right pocket also. And I've seen people put it in their chest pocket or tuck it somewhere in the monitor. Wherever works. But we all know that we have a place where we're going to put the nitro because you're not going to put it inside the bag, up on the shelf, right? It's not going to happen. But that's part of how. So long story, but it perfectly illustrates it, right? And I could see it all over her face that she was just like, oh, I got to get that back out. That's what simulation does for us. It tweaks some of that.
I love simulation training. I had one recently where we did it was an extrication out of a car. We had a mom and then a baby and a toddler. All right, and I had my phone on for the baby to be crying, and it was loud. Like, they're doing extrication training, so like there's a lot of tools out being utilized. But anyways, the squad comes in, they do an assessment, stuff like that, and they find the mom because the mom was outside of the vehicle. She was confused, and she was saying, "Oh, I got to pick up my kid at school." Well, they never checked the vehicle because they thought that was their only patient, and eventually they're like, "Hey, make sure vehicle's turned off." Someone just shouted out something random. They're like, "Hey, we got kids in here." And it was interesting, the more we did simulations with that specific people in that group, we would have simulations with kids again. And one of the individuals with a totally different simulation that had a kid, he grabbed the kid. He didn't forget the kid. He made sure to look for a kid. He made sure to look for other patients because he's like, I forgot it. I forgot that patient.
Yeah, there's actually research out there that says that we internalize simulation as if it's real. And so, perfect example of your firefighter, right? Like them leaving that child before or missing that child before, they internalize that as I left patients. I missed that. I could have done that for real, right? And it's internalized very, very similarly. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised that they fixed it, right? Because that's what happens, and that's an amazing part of simulation, which I think it's great that it's now a requirement. I'm glad we were doing it before it was a requirement, and it's a lot of fun, right? I think it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun.
It is. All right, before we leave today.
So I want to throw one more piece in,
sorry.
just because I can, and I think we, as educators, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I think we as educators do not the greatest job at prepping students for what we all wish didn't happen. And what I mean by that is making sure that they are not necessarily exposed, but understand that bad things do happen. And when they do, how to cope with them and how to handle them. We make this out to be, the book textbooks all say, you get to your patient, what are you going to do? You're going to treat and transport them. Well, what happens when you get to that run or you get to that scene and it's somebody who woke up to find their spouse of 50 some odd years dead next to them because they died in their sleep? How do you cope with that? How do you break the news of that to somebody? Showing up on an accident scene of somebody that's been thrown out of a car and is not there. Some of the horrific things that we as first responders see throughout our careers, and making sure that they know that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? Occasionally we do have that point of sorrow, and how do we cope with that and how do we deal with that? And that's something that's not taught in the book. That's something that we as educators have to make sure that we relay to students, because it's a reality. And it's a tough lesson. I did it with my MT class recently where it's, we talked about the whole death and dying thing. Like, how do you do that? And I put them in a tough situation. Tell me that my wife of 50 years is dead, and they're just like deer in the headlights, like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing, right? So I broke it down and I said, this is how I would have this conversation. And I sat down in a chair next to the student and I put my hand on their knee and said, I'm sorry. And using those tough words too, right? And Jen preaches about this, and I never really thought about it until I heard her lecture on it one day, and using those hard words. And the textbook actually teaches us they're dead. Don't say they're passed away. Don't say they're gone. Don't try to sugarcoat it or anything, but be very realistic with that situation. Those are things that the book doesn't teach you very well. Documentation is another one that isn't taught that great, but trying to incorporate those into your lessons as well.
Earlier, I was having a conversation with another medic, and we were specifically talking about traumas and like kind of newer studies about should you give epi, should you do CPR on significant trauma, stuff like that. And, EMS is gray. It's very, very gray. It's not black and white. And I'm like, it's really hard for a new ALS provider, paramedic, advanced EMT, to make that call when it's not black and white. But as an experienced medic, or a little bit of an experienced medic, I have at least, I think, 6 years now. Makes me feel old.
Makes you feel old? I remember Caitlin in the classroom, so.
For me, it's a little bit more easier to be like, oh, like their chest cavity is ruined. Like I'm just abusing a body here by working them, by doing all of this stuff versus someone new. And having those conversations, it's a hard call to be like, I'm not gonna work this person because they are not viable.
Yeah, I think there's part of that, it's a hard call, but I think when we approach it the right way, we change some of the dynamic of it in our brain. And that is that we're recognizing that person, that body, as somebody to help Or are we just going through the motions because we think they're required, right? What's the outcome likely to be? And what's our reason for that? Sometimes we have to work things that we all know that probably would be better left not being worked because they're not viable. But every now and then, that allows the family to get some last moments or whatever. But I think when we approach it as, I don't know how to explain it well without an example. There are times that we are forced to do CPR on patients because of patient and family wishes. And we know that what we're doing is disrespecting that person's body and their soul by doing the things that we're doing, because there's no hope. There's not going to be an outcome, right? We've got a end title of 12, and they've been in asystole for 10, 15 minutes, and they were down for 15 or 20 minutes with nothing beforehand. They're just not cold, and we know that we're not bringing them back, right? They're 90 with all these comorbidities, and yet somebody wants us to keep going, and so we do, because that's the job, and we try as hard as we can, and we do all the things, but it feels disrespectful and it feels wrong. And I think when we're in those situations where the decision is ours to make because of the situation, like particularly those traumas, if we feel like we're disrespecting that body, then we are.
Yep.
And I think that's a big piece, right? Again, back to the why.
Yeah.
Simon Sinek said it, right? Like, what's the why? Always.
Now, before we go, I want to ask you guys, have you any book, podcast, movie recommendations for the people out there? It could be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be EMS related, but it can.
The Pit. I just started watching The Pit, and I found, so I've watched everything that's been out so far about The Pit. Have you guys seen The Pit?
No idea.
So
what
it is.
I'm like an episode and a half into, yeah.
So Noah Wiley is like the big star in this, and he was on ER, which I grew up with, right? And, well, not grew up with. My formative EMT time, like ER was out, and I was watching it. And I remember getting mad at ER because there was lots of medical inaccuracies. They had the big things right. The Pit, I've noticed one big thing that was wrong medically, and I've watched everything. And the last episode, they even got some EMS history in there, and they got it right, and it's cool. I would say The Pit, devour it. It's amazing. For those of you out there in listening land that don't know, The Pit is Pittsburgh ER downtown, and actually every episode is an hour of real life time in this ER. So it isn't, they don't spread the time out like you're dealing with the ER in a crazy inner city Pittsburgh hospital as it is for that hour. And, obviously it's drama, it's not real, but it's good. So I would say The Pit. Podcast, I am always going to preach Medic Mindset with Ginger Locke. She's a rock star. I met her once, fangirl, got all like stupid and weird and inadequate because she's an amazing educator and she has an amazing podcast.
I'm going to second the Medic Mindset. I really like that one.
I would thank everyone out there for listening, and just remember, leave it better than you found it.